On the fog-drowned edge of Salem County stood Black Hollow Manor, a towering relic of decayed grandeur. The iron gates hung crooked on their hinges, groaning like old ghosts each time the wind passed through. Locals rarely came near. They said the house had gone cold since the Whitmore sisters locked themselves inside, and never came out again. It was winter 1897 when Thomas Gray, a quiet caretaker from Boston, arrived at the estate. The letter of employment was written in a refined but shaky hand. "Tend the grounds," it read. "No entry to the upper floor. Payment will be delivered promptly." Thomas had worked in many lonely places before, but there was something about Black Hollow that unsettled him instantly. The air smelled faintly of iron and damp wood. The windows were sealed from the inside, curtains drawn tight even in the daytime, and somewhere within those walls a slow, rhythmic ticking echoed. Though no clock could be found, the Whitmore sisters, Lillian and Beatrice, were polite, though distant. Lillian handled the household's affairs, speaking softly, never smiling. Beatrice was rarely seen. On the rare occasions Thomas glimpsed her, she appeared in the hallway shadows, thin, pale, and staring just a bit too long, as if studying him. On his third night, Thomas awoke to the faint creaking of the ceiling boards above his room. The manor was silent except for the sound, soft, deliberate pacing. He wrapped his shawl around his shoulders and lit a candle, its flame trembling. The noise stopped the moment he stepped into the hall. He followed it to the narrow staircase at the far end of the corridor. The door to the attic was shut with 3 heavy locks and covered in dust, but from behind it came a faint scratching, as though something, or someone, was trying to write against the wood. The next morning, Thomas mentioned it over breakfast. "Miss Lillian," he began carefully, "I heard noises from the attic last night." Her silver spoon froze mid-air. She looked at him, her eyes unreadable. "There is no attic, Mr. Gray," she said quietly. "Not in this house," Thomas frowned. "Then what's above my room?" "Only the roof," she replied and went back to her tea. But that night, when the storm rolled in and the wind howled against the shutters, he saw it, a flicker of candlelight through the boards of the attic window. Someone was up there. As he turned from the window, a folded note slid under his door. The handwriting was hurried, uneven. "Do not go up. She isn't who she seems, and she will not let you leave." Thomas froze. The paper was damp and smelled faintly of smoke. Moments later, he heard a sound he could not explain. A woman's voice, faint but clear, drifting down from the ceiling above him. "Thomas." "Come closer," his candle flickered. The flame bent toward the attic door as if drawn by breath, and in that moment he realized the sound wasn't coming from above. It was coming from inside the walls. The next morning, Thomas Gray tried to convince himself it had been a dream. The voice, the note, the cold air that seemed to breathe down his neck. But the paper was still there, lying on the floor beside his bed, its words now smudged as if by damp fingers. At breakfast, only Lillian appeared. Her eyes looked more sunken than the day before. When Thomas asked about her sister, she said calmly, "Beatrice is unwell. She prefers to rest upstairs." Thomas dared not mention the voice, but as he left the dining room he noticed something odd. Dust along the hallway floorboards disturbed by footprints. Small footprints. They led toward the locked attic stairwell, and then stopped, vanished, mid-step, as if the person had melted into the floor. That night, the sounds returned, soft tapping behind the wallpaper, faint whispers beneath the crackling fire. The walls themselves seemed to hum, as if alive. Thomas pressed his ear to the plaster and heard faint words, overlapping whispers. "Don't let her see you." The attic. He stumbled back, heart pounding. His candle flickered violently, and for an instant he saw the outline of a hand from inside the wall pressing against it. The next morning, Thomas confronted Lillian again. "There's something moving in your house," he said. "I hear voices in the walls. Someone's trapped up there." Her porcelain teacup trembled in her hand. "You mustn't listen," she said softly. "That's how she finds you." "Who?" he demanded. But Lillian only smiled faintly, her eyes unfocused. "The one who remembers," she whispered. That evening, Thomas searched the lower floors of the manor. Dust lay thick, untouched for years, until he reached the old study. Inside, beneath a torn sheet, he found a tall mirror, its glass cracked into spiderwebs. Across its surface, faint writing appeared as he exhaled. "Help her remember." He staggered back. And then behind him, footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from the dark corridor. "Miss Lillian," he called. But when he turned, it wasn't Lillian. A pale woman stood in the hall, her nightgown stained and torn, her eyes distant and gray. She tilted her head as if trying to recognize him, then whispered in a voice that froze his blood. "You're not supposed to be here yet." Thomas dropped his lantern. The flame burst, shadows leapt across the walls. When he looked again, the woman was gone. Only the faint scent of old perfume lingered in the air. He stumbled toward his room, but on his door was a new note, written in the same trembling hand as before. "She's awake now. Don't look into the mirror again." Sleep came to Thomas Gray in fragments that night, shattered by whispers, footsteps, and the hollow creak of the house shifting under its own weight. When dawn finally bled through the curtains, he woke drenched in sweat, convinced that something, or someone, had stood beside his bed for hours, simply watching. He rose to find the note from the night before gone. In its place, the words, "Don't look into the mirror again," were carved into the wood of his door. By noon, Thomas could no longer ignore it. He had to know what haunted the manor. Armed with a lantern, he searched the upper corridors, tracing every sound until he reached the narrow staircase sealed by 3 iron locks. The attic door, but now, one of the locks hung open. He hesitated, hand trembling, then turned the latch. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for a draft of cold air to spill through, carrying the faint scent of rotting roses. Inside was darkness, a deeper darkness than any night could hold. He raised his lantern. Dust floated like ash. There were no windows, no furniture, only the outline of something on the far wall. A mirror, half covered by a sheet, and then faintly a breath behind him. "Miss Beatrice." He whispered, no answer, only the slow creak of the floorboards as if the house itself were shifting closer. He turned back to the mirror. The cloth had fallen away. 2 reflections stared back at him, his own. And another, a woman, her face pale as wax, eyes hollow, mouth moving soundlessly. Thomas froze. The woman's reflection raised its hand, and so did he. But when he stopped, she didn't. Her palm pressed flat against the inside of the glass. For a moment he thought it was a trick of the light, until a small crack spidered across the mirror's surface and a drop of blood slid down the glass from inside. Thomas stumbled back, heart pounding. "Who are you?" he gasped. Her lips moved again, shaping words he couldn't hear, until a whisper echoed inside his mind. "You already know." The mirror flickered. For a heartbeat, Thomas saw not the reflection of the attic, but another room entirely. A nursery, dust-covered toys, a rocking chair swaying on its own, and then a third figure standing behind him. He spun around. Nothing. The reflection snapped back to normal. The woman was gone. But the mirror now showed something new. Carved at the bottom edge were words burned into the glass. She never left. Thomas ran downstairs, nearly colliding with Lillian in the hall. Her expression was tight, fearful. "You went up there," she said. "It wasn't a question. I had to," he replied, voice shaking. "There's someone trapped in that mirror, someone trying to speak to me." Lillian's face drained of color. She whispered, "There's no one trapped, Mr. Gray. The mirror doesn't hold the dead." She glanced toward the ceiling. "It releases them." A sudden crash echoed from upstairs, glass shattering, wood splintering. Lillian turned pale. "It's too late. She's out." Thomas Gray didn't sleep that night. Every tick of the hall clock sounded like footsteps approaching his door. The house seemed to breathe. The wallpaper pulsed faintly as if alive beneath his fingertips. Somewhere above, something dragged across the attic floor, slow, scraping, deliberate. When dawn came, Lillian Whitmore was already waiting for him in the dining room. Her teacup trembled in her hand. "You've set her free," she whispered. "I begged you not to open that door." Thomas tried to speak, but the look in her eyes stopped him. "Who is she?" he asked finally. Lillian's gaze drifted toward the ceiling. My sister, she said. But not the one you've seen, he frowned. You mean Beatrice? She nodded slowly. Beatrice died in that attic 12 years ago. The one who walks now is something that wears her face. The room fell silent, except for the steady patter of rain against the windows. Lillian rose from her chair and crossed to a locked cabinet. She opened it and pulled out a small black book, its pages warped with moisture. My father kept records, she said. He believed in spiritual continuance, a mirror ritual, a way to preserve the mind beyond death. Thomas's hands shook as he took the book. Inside were sketches of human figures reflected in mirrors, accompanied by frantic notes. Essence transfer incomplete. Host unstable, he looked up. You're saying your father trapped Beatrice? Lillian's voice cracked. He tried to save her. Her mind, her soul, it was fragmented. He believed the mirror could hold what her body couldn't. Thomas flipped another page and froze. There, scrawled in the margin, was his own name. How do you explain this? He whispered. Lillian's lips quivered. Because you were chosen. A sudden chill swept through the room. The lights flickered. The fire hissed and died. In the reflection of the tea-set silver tray, Thomas saw a third figure standing behind him. A woman's pale face. Her mouth sewn shut. He spun around. Nothing. But when he turned back to the tray, the reflection was still there, closer now. And this time, her mouth was open. A whisper filled the air, like breath against his ear. You will remember for me. The windows burst open, slamming against the walls. Lillian screamed. Papers flew across the room as an unseen wind howled through the manor. Thomas grabbed the mirror book, pages flapping violently, and saw one final note written in red ink. If the mirror breaks, the host awakens. And then, from upstairs, came the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Lillian's face went white. She's awake. Thomas ran to the stairs, the sound of footsteps echoing above him. A woman's voice began to call down, distant but rising with each step. Thomas, come upstairs. I remember now. He stopped at the foot of the stairs, every instinct screaming to run, but his body refused to move. The air grew colder. A shape appeared at the top of the staircase, Beatrice Whitmore, or what was left of her. Her face was half-shadowed, eyes glowing faintly like dying embers. In her hand, she held a shard of broken glass, its edge dripping red. She smiled faintly. You freed me, Thomas, she whispered. Now it's your turn. Thomas Gray had always believed that madness belonged to others. The lonely widows, the haunted poets, the ones who stared too long into candlelight. But as dawn broke over Black Hollow Manor, he felt madness stirring behind his own eyes. He could still hear her voice from the stairwell, soft, rhythmic, patient. Now it's your turn. The house was wrong that morning. The walls seemed closer, the corridors narrower. Portraits that once faced the hall now hung turned toward the wall. In the cracked mirrors of the foyer, Thomas caught glimpses of movement, his reflection lagging behind. Eyes blinking a moment too late, he tried to find Lillian. But every door he opened revealed the same room again and again, his own. Each time he stepped inside, the angle of the light changed. The wallpaper seemed darker, and the smell of rotting roses grew stronger. At last he found her in the drawing room, clutching her father's black ritual book. She's inside you, Lillian whispered. I can see it. Thomas staggered back. You're not making sense. The mirror chose you, she said. She needed a host to remember herself, a living vessel to finish what our father began. He looked down at his hands. The skin was pale, veins dark. Beneath the surface, something pulsed, not blood, but light. He dropped to his knees as whispers filled his head, hundreds of voices overlapping. Remember, remember, remember. He crawled toward the mirror that hung shattered on the wall. His reflection was smiling, though his face was not. Stop it! He shouted. The reflection tilted its head, lips moving out of sync. You freed me. Now let me in. The air thickened. The candle flames bent toward him. His breath fogged through the fire still burned. Then pain, white-hot, like something tearing through his chest. He saw flashes. A woman's death in the attic, her screams, her sister's tears, a mirror catching it all like a hungry eye. He saw Lillian's father chanting words he didn't understand as the mirror bled light. And then, silence. When Thomas opened his eyes, the room was still. Lillian stood trembling before him. "Thomas?" she whispered. He turned slowly. His eyes were grey now. His voice, when it came, was soft. Too soft. "Beatrice," Lillian breathed. He smiled faintly. "Yes, sister. You kept my house well." Lillian fell to her knees. "No, please," I tried to stop it. Beatrice, or what now wore Thomas's face, reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "You shouldn't have buried me in the walls." Lightning flashed. The window shattered. For an instant, Lillian saw two faces overlaying one another, Thomas's and Beatrice's, both smiling, both wrong. The storm roared. The manor groaned like a living thing. From somewhere deep above, in the burned-out attic, a mirror reformed itself. Cracks sealing, glass smoothing, a new reflection appearing. It was Thomas, screaming silently from inside. Black Hollow Manor no longer felt like a house. It breathed. It pulsed. It remembered. After the storm, the townsfolk said the lights in the manor burned for 3 nights straight, though no one had lived there for years. But inside, Thomas Gray, or what was left of him, stood before the mirror in the attic. His reflection whispering words his mouth didn't move to say. The glass shimmered, alive with soft light. On the other side, his true self pounded against the barrier, trapped in silence. Below, Lillian Whitmore searched the house, her lantern flickering, her gown torn. The hallways changed with every turn. Doors led nowhere, stairs vanished halfway. Her father's black ritual book trembled in her hands, pages fluttering open to a final passage written in her own handwriting. The vessel can be freed only by the breaking of memory. The living must forget. Her breath caught. Forget. Could she erase her own sister again, this time forever? A voice drifted down from the attic, gentle and melodic. "Lillian, come upstairs. You always come upstairs." Tears streaked her face as she climbed the narrow staircase, the lantern's flame bending toward the attic door like it was drawn to her grief. The mirror glowed faintly through the crack. Inside stood Thomas, or Beatrice within him, smiling. "You kept me waiting," she whispered. Lillian raised the lantern. "Let him go." Beatrice tilted her head. "He's not a prisoner. He's a memory now. The same as me." The mirror began to ripple like water. In its surface, Lillian saw her younger self, laughing, brushing Beatrice's hair before the illness, before the rituals, before the house learned to whisper. The reflection looked at her and whispered, "Remember me." Lillian dropped the book. "No," she said softly. "I can't." And then she hurled the lantern into the mirror. The glass shattered in an explosion of light and sound. Screams, dozens of them, echoed through the manor, voices twisting, merging, fading. The fire spread fast, hungry, devouring the curtains, the portraits, the very walls that had hidden their sins. Lillian fell to her knees as the roof cracked overhead. Through the flames, she saw Thomas, no Beatrice, reaching out, her face flickering between them. "Let me out," the voice cried. "I already did," Lillian whispered. The ceiling collapsed. When the fire finally died, nothing remained of Black Hollow Manor but scorched earth and twisted iron. The townsfolk built a small park on the site, planting trees that never took root. Years later, children playing near the old stone well said they sometimes saw a woman's face reflected in the water, smiling faintly, whispering, "Remember me." And when the wind blew just right, they swore they could hear it too, the faint sound of tapping coming from somewhere beneath the ground.